in the studio alongside Micah Richards. Join us after the news.
Now on BBC One, the evening BBC News with Clive Myrie.
Tonight at 10, the UK records its highest number of coronavirus vaccinations in a single day, close to 600,000. Nearly 9 million people have received their first injection, but there's a warning the lockdown must not be eased too quickly.
Any releases that we have will have to happen very slowly, very cautiously, watching and waiting as we go.
Captain Sir Tom Moore, who raised millions of pounds for the NHS, has been taken to hospital after testing positive for coronavirus. We'll have the very latest, also on the programme. Thousands are arrested across Russia during mass protests in support of the jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Police investigate after Man United's Marcus Rashford is the latest player racially abused on social media. And the price of living in a flat with flammable cladding. Insurance costs up 1,000% since the Grenfell tragedy. Good evening. The UK has achieved its highest number of coronavirus vaccinations in a single day, with nearly 600,000 injections recorded yesterday, according to the latest government figures. Nearly 9 million people have received their first jab. That's 1 in 6 of the adult population. But there's caution tonight from one of England's senior public health officials that easing lockdown rules should only proceed very slowly. Our first report tonight is from our health correspondent, Jim Reid.
Here at this basketball stadium in Newcastle, the vaccine rollout continues.
Hello. Can you just confirm your name for me?
Across the UK, nearly 600,000 people received their jab yesterday, a new record, 2,000 at this site alone.
I'm feeling fine, smashing. I'm pleased I've come to Curragh, because the long days when you're in a house all day by yourself.
It means that eventually we will be coming out of this, and it's something to look forward to.
There has been some concern about the supply of the Pfizer vaccine in particular, but the government said today it's confident there won't be any hold-up. In total, 3/4 of those between 75 and 80 have now been offered their first dose, with 2 weeks to go for ministers to hit their target of reaching the 4 most at-risk groups.
The more people who take up the vaccine, the more we'll be protected as a society. So that high take-up is incredibly important.
It comes, though, as scientists urge caution, saying even if vaccination targets are met, lockdown rules would have to remain in place for some time to come.
I hope that this summer will be similar to last summer. I hope that we'll be down to those sort of case numbers, but I think that we need to be very cautious on that. We do not want to have another wave as we've had this winter.
But as the number receiving the vaccine goes up, there are more questions about who should be prioritised next. Labour says teachers and other key workers should be high on that list, perhaps above 50-year-olds.
If you're in your 50s and able to work from home, you've got a car, you don't have to go out much, you are taking less risks than somebody who's going to work in a supermarket, travelling by bus there every day.
Scientists now say they're watching the vaccination data closely. If the whole programme is working as hoped, within 2 weeks we should start to see an impact on cases and, crucially, the numbers in hospital. Jim Reid, BBC News.
Well, the latest government figures show there were 21,088 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means that, on average, the number of new cases reported per day in the last week is 24,245. The number of people in hospital is falling slightly, down to 34,783. 587 deaths were reported. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, there were more than 1,100 deaths announced every day, taking the total so far across the UK to over 106,000. On the vaccine rollout, as we've been hearing, a record 598,389 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period. That means almost 9 million people in the UK have had their first injection. Well, for more, our health editor Hugh Pym is with me. Hugh, very good news on vaccines. The government close to meeting potentially its targets?
Yes, Clive, an impressive total, nearly 600,000 in a day. The target is for 15 million people to be offered the vaccine by the middle of February. That is in all age groups over the age of 70 and clinically extremely vulnerable and care home staff and NHS staff and care staff. Now, the rate of increase is now 2.6 million a week. And if you do the arithmetic, there's just over 2 weeks to go. They should get pretty near to that 15 million target. But that is offers of the vaccine as opposed to numbers actually vaccinated. Now, earlier in this week, it was below 300,000 daily total, and government sources were acknowledging that supply was a bit lumpy, but more would come on stream towards the end of the week, and we've just seen the fruits of that, if you like. So there are going to be issues over supply in the weeks ahead. No one's denying that, but this certainly seems to be on track at the moment.
News today of Captain Sir Tom Moore in hospital with coronavirus. What more do we know?
Yes, Captain Sir Tom Moore, aged 100. His family say he developed pneumonia and had breathing difficulties and then tested positive. He has been admitted to Bedford Hospital. His family say he hadn't had a vaccination because of the medication he was on for pneumonia. He's not in intensive care. Captain Sir Tom obviously raised 33 million last year for the NHS and was knighted. He himself and his family tweeted that they were enjoying a holiday in Barbados in December. Tonight, the Prime Minister has tweeted saying he was sure the whole nation would agree to pass on the message that they were wishing Captain Sir Tom a full recovery.
Indeed. OK. Hugh, many thanks. Hugh Pym there. Meanwhile, the Irish Prime Minister says EU member states were blindsided by a decision by the European Commission to trigger a provision in the Brexit deal, which would have seen checks at the border with Northern Ireland. Brussels subsequently backed down, putting pressure on the head of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Downing Street says it's confident the UK's access to vaccines won't be disrupted, as our political correspondent Nick Eardley explains.
Keeping the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic open was a priority in Brexit talks, so the EU faced intense criticism after drawing up plans to introduce controls on vaccine imports. Ministers in London and Dublin intervened to tell Brussels it had made a big mistake.
The Commission should have spoken to you first, should it not?
Yes, and we've had that conversation, and I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from how all of this transpired, because it took 4 years to put the protocol together. People were blindsided by the decision that was taken and its implications for the protocol.
The vaccine rollout in the EU has been slow, with tension over supply delays. The Under Pressure Commission President held talks with pharmaceutical companies this afternoon. Ursula von der Leyen said AstraZeneca had agreed to deliver 9 million additional doses. Speaking to German TV Tonight, she emphasised cooperation.
I had a very good conversation with Boris Johnson last night precisely about this question. It makes a lot more sense to work together at this stage of the pandemic. I was pleased that he said that the 2 plants that manufacture AstraZeneca naturally also deliver to Europe. This is the spirit in which we have to approach this pandemic.
But in the UK, hundreds of thousands are being jabbed daily, with a record number yesterday. And ministers have even suggested that eventually spare doses could be given to other countries.
I hope that once we do have those most vulnerable in Britain vaccinated, when we're on track with our vaccine programme, we will be able to look at helping the developing world and, of course, our friends and neighbours, because, we need everybody to be protected. That's the way we're going to grip this disease.
For all the criticisms of government policy, the vaccine rollout here has been one of the speediest in the world. The situation in Europe shows that that wasn't guaranteed. And despite those tensions with Brussels, the fact that ministers here are even prepared to talk about the idea of sharing vaccines is a sign of confidence. Vaccines are a key tool in the government's plans to lift lockdown, and for now, the rollout remains on track. Nick Eardley, BBC News.
Well, our Europe editor, Katya Adler, is in Brussels for us. Katya, the EU Commission seemingly all over the shop on this one. Has it managed to secure the vaccines it needs?
Well, Clive, we did hear today that the Commission says it's got an extra 9 million vaccines. And of course, every jab counts when people are trying to protect themselves and their families. But this would still bring the Commission well sort of short of the supply that it promised the EU before the end of March. And there really is a lot of anger about, because the Commission promised to purchase vaccines on behalf of every single EU country. And it did that. It bought more than 2 billion jabs, it says, in theory. But in practice, these have been really slow to arrive, and people here look at the UK, they look at the US, and they want to know why the EU is lagging so far behind. There are accusations of mismanagement at the very highest levels in the Commission, accusations that it was really slow to sign contracts with pharmaceutical companies, and that when vaccines haven't appeared as they believed they would, that they panicked and lashed out in all directions, threatening legal action, for example, and even, as we know, dragging in the Brexit deal on Northern Ireland. This has become the #1 political issue in the EU, Clive, now at every level, for individuals, for EU countries, because of course this is now impacting national politics in the EU as well, and of course then here in the Commission here in Brussels too.
OK, Katya, thank you for that. Katya Adler there in Brussels. Thousands of people have been arrested across Russia following mass protests in support of the jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Riot police and National Guard troops shut down parts of the capital, Moscow, for a time, closing metro stations and blocking off streets as thousands of people demanded Mr. Navalny's release. He was jailed on his return to Russia after recovering from an assassination attempt. Our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg has more.
By law, Russians have the right to peaceful protest. On paper. In Moscow today, police were determined to clear the streets. Whatever it took. Some people got away. But hundreds were detained in the Russian capital. Protesters had come out in support of Alexei Navalny, the Kremlin critic who's in jail.
Moscow police had warned that any protest in the city today would be considered illegal and broken up, and that's exactly what's happening right now. The message is that the authorities are determined to crack down on dissent.
But the crowds swelled and moved through the city. Moscow, take to the streets, they're chanting. The riot police tried to stop them, but they were playing catch-up all afternoon. Mr. Navalny's arrest was the trigger for this, but resentment of the authorities has been building.
We've been stagnating for like 20 years of Putin's rule, and I believe that we need some change.
I wanted freedom for our country. The situation now is the worst, I think, in the last 10 years.
This too brought Russians onto the streets. Alexei Navalny's recent video alleging that Vladimir Putin built himself a £1 billion palace with illicit money, complete with £600 toilet brushes. The Kremlin's denied it, but the videos had more than 100 million views online. The result, the toilet brush has become the symbol of this protest, the embodiment of what many here believe is massive corruption at the top. There were protests across Russia, from St. Petersburg to Siberia and the Russian Far East. But will they force a Kremlin U-turn and Mr. Navalny's release? No sign of that. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
A team of experts from the World Health Organization has visited the seafood market in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the world's first major outbreak of the coronavirus was confirmed. The visit was part of an inspection that began on Friday with the aim of identifying the origins of the pandemic. The government says Britain wants to join a Pacific Trade Partnership comprising 11 countries, including Australia and Japan. Known as the CPTPP, it could offer tariff-free access to a potential market of around 500 million people. In 2019, Pacific Trade Partnership nations accounted for a little over 8% of UK exports, roughly the same proportion as Germany alone. Tomorrow, MPs will debate the plight of millions of people still living in flats covered in flammable cladding 3.5 years after the Grenfell Tower disaster. Many say they're suffering financial hardship due to sky-high insurance bills. At one tower block in Cheshire, premiums have gone up by more than 1,000% since safety issues were first reported there. Our correspondent Sarah Corker has the details.
Waterfront living on the banks of the River Mersey. This is the Decks in Runcorn. Gail bought a 2-bed apartment here 10 years ago.
Our lifelong dreams of our own property, house of our dreams.
But since then, fire safety faults have been found in all 6 blocks, including dangerous cladding, and building insurance bills have soared, rising from £34,000 a year to more than £500,000. For Gail, who works in retail, that means finding an extra £2,000.
Oh, I just cried. I cried. I said, where are we supposed to find that kind of money?
And if you can't find that money, what have you been told could happen?
We're out. We'll forfeit the apartment. It's so hard. I don't know what to do next.
And it's not just insurance costs. Big repair bills are looming.
You know, we're working class people. You know, we've appealed to the government. Do the right thing. We're not responsible for this.
Seren Park Gardens was marketed as a green oasis in South London. A decade on, green algae is taking root in the timber cladding, which is also highly flammable. The block's insurance costs have soared from £123,000 to more than £650,000 a year.
I don't understand why they can suddenly push up the prices. Either they're unwilling to bear the risk, which doesn't make sense because they've presumably borne the risk successfully in the past. Either that or they're just using this to profit dramatically.
For some buildings, insurance costs have gone up by more than 1,000%. How on earth can you justify that?
The process of getting buildings fixed is far too slow. Too many people are going to sleep at night in dangerous buildings, and that's simply unacceptable. The high cost of insurance is a symptom of those problems.
What started as a cladding scandal has now become a much wider building safety crisis. Inspections of high-rises in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire have exposed many other faults: flammable balconies, defective insulation, missing fire breaks, and flat owners feel trapped.
This is clearly a very urgent situation, but it's a very complex and multifaceted challenge. I think it's right that we come up with the most comprehensive and effective solution before we start making those details public.
But the longer it takes to get to grips with this safety crisis, the more money drains away from flat owners like Lee. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
The footballer Marcus Rashford says he's been the target of online racist abuse. On Twitter, he said he'd been subjected to humanity and social media at its worst on the platform after his side's goalless draw with Arsenal. Greater Manchester Police is investigating. Lester McGregor has more.
Taking a knee, a unified protest for racial equality. It's a gesture we've become accustomed to, and last night, the latest example of why players continue to do so. Manchester United striker Marcus Rashford, the latest high-profile target of racial abuse online. In reply, he posted, "I am a black man and proud. No one or no comment is going to make me feel any different." This week alone, Rashford's teammates Anthony Martial and Axel Tuanzebe, Chelsea's Reece James and West Brom's Romain Sawyers, other black footballers subjected to discrimination online. Today, the Duke of Cambridge, who is also president of the Football Association, condemned such online behaviour. Prince William said, "We all have a responsibility to create an environment where such abuse is not tolerated, and that responsibility extends to the platforms where so much of this activity takes place."
There's no fear at the moment, is there? You know, if you look at the amount of abuse that is on our platforms at the moment, there's no fear of reprisal. You know, people are doing it almost knowing that, you know, it's a one in how many chance of being caught. Accountability is probably the biggest thing here, you know, being accountable for the users on your platform.
Facebook, which owns Instagram, says there's no place for racism on its platforms and it's committed to tackling abuse. It says it's already removed accounts in this case. Those in the know say the technology is also out there to help.
The problem is that the reporting systems that they've got in place at the moment require a player to receive and then report the abuse themselves. And by that point, the damage has already been done. But they've got other issues to deal with as well. Terrorism globally is a problem that Facebook has to deal with. Disinformation globally is a problem that Facebook has to deal with.
Earlier this week, the government held talks with footballers, including Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson, with new laws set to be introduced to stop online abuse. Racism is a societal issue. Football, a keen battleground. Those committed to the fight vow to continue to take a stand, as well as a knee. Nesta McGregor, BBC News.
Evidence about the way the emergency services responded to the Manchester Arena attack will begin this week at the public inquiry into what happened. Little is known about the members of the public who helped the injured and tended to those who were killed in the absence of proper medical help and equipment. Survivors say it's vital their role isn't overlooked in the official version of events. Well, our North of England correspondent Judith Moritz has been speaking to two of them and a warning her report contains some distressing details.
Police emergency, hello?
Can you hear me? Yeah, there's an explosion at Manchester Arena!
Is anybody injured?
Yes, Lord!
We're just going to get as many ambulances and fire and all that to as we can.
Yeah, as many ambulances as we can at the moment. We've got very few.
I'm just shouting out, help, we need paramedics.
There's that instant expectation that there's going to be help, and it just didn't come.
In the wake of the bomb at Manchester Arena, the most seriously injured couldn't move from where they fell. And though blue lights pulsed outside, inside there was only one paramedic for the first 40 minutes. Jane Tweddle lay fatally hurt. There was little expertise or equipment on hand. It was left to a stranger, Sean Gardner, to sit by her side as her life slipped away.
When you're faced with injuries so severe, you just, I'm not trained, I don't know what to do. You just feel so helpless. All you can do is comfort, and it's not enough, but that's all I felt I could do.
Did you speak to Jane? Were you trying to communicate with her?
Yeah, I sort of held her hand, and she knew somebody was next to her, I suppose. That was the main thing.
Ordinary people found themselves on the medical front line, and some depended on them for survival. Children like Freya Lewis, who was very badly hurt and fell into the arms of a stranger.
I kept saying to her, I'm not going to leave you, I'm not going to leave you.
Kim Dick looked after Freya for over an hour. The teenager had 29 injuries.
I had to hold Freya with all my might, sat up in an upright position.
How do you feel about the fact the help wasn't there straight away?
At the time, really helpless. Because I could see what was going on, and especially Freya was losing so much blood. Luckily, from watching TV, I knew to keep her upright from swallowing the blood, choking on the blood. But we needed help.
Hello.
Hello. Their story has a happy ending. Freya has stayed in touch with Kim and her husband Phil. She says she owes her life to them.
I think the absolute world of them. They're in my thoughts every single day. They are the reason why I'm still here. And Kim and Phil, they saved my life. They acted as my parents when my parents couldn't. And I'll always, for the rest of my life, be eternally grateful to them because, they're just amazing.
Kim and Freya now share a bond forged from terrible circumstances. The survivor and her hero, just one of the ordinary people who stepped up when help was so desperately needed. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
That's it. There's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel, but now on BBC One. Time for the news where you are. Have a very good night.